The dispute over Epidamnus, section 24. The city of Epidamnus is on the right of the approach to the Ionic Gulf. It is in foreign territory that is inhabited by an Illyrian race called the Taulantians. The place is a colony of Corcyra, and it was founded by Phallius, the son of Eratocleides, a Corinthian of the family of the Heraclids. In accordance with the old custom, the founder had been invited from the mother city. Among the colonists there were also a certain number of Corinthians and some other Dorians. As time went on, Epidamnus became both powerful and populous. But there followed many years of political unrest caused, they say, by a war with the foreign inhabitants of the country. As a result of this, Epidamnus declined and lost most of her power. Finally, just before the war between Athens and Sparta, the Democratic Party drove out the Aristocratic Party, who then went over to the foreign enemies of the city and joined them in making piratical attacks on the city both by sea and by land. The Democrats inside the city now found themselves in difficulties and sent an embassy to Corcyra, begging their mother country not to allow them to perish, and asking for help both in making some settlement with the exiled party and in putting an end to the war with the foreigners. The ambassadors took up their position in the temple of Hera in Corcyra, and there made their request. But the people of Corcyra refused to receive the ambassadors and sent them back without having achieved anything. Section 25. When the people in Epidamnus realized that no help was forthcoming from Corcyra, they were at a loss at how to deal with the situation. They therefore sent to Delphi to inquire from the god there, that is Apollo, whether they should hand over their city to the Corinthians, who had founded it, and so get help from that quarter. The reply from Delphi was that they should hand over their city and accept the leadership of Corinth. So, in obedience to the oracle, they sent to Corinth and made over the colony to the Corinthians. They pointed out that the original founder had come from Corinth, and they made public the reply which they had received from Delphi, and they begged the Corinthians to come to their help and not allow them to be destroyed. The Corinthians agreed to come to their assistance. They felt they had a good right to do so, since they regarded the colony as belonging just as much to them as to Corcyra, and at the same time they hated the Corcyrians because they failed to show to Corinth the respect due from a colony to the mother city. Unlike their other colonies, the Corcyrians did not give to Corinth the usual rights and honors at public festivals or allow them the correct facilities for making sacrifices. Instead, they looked down upon their mother city, claiming that their financial power at this time made them equal with the richest states in Hellas, and that their military resources were greater than those of Corinth. In particular, they boasted of their naval superiority, sometimes even basing this claim on the grounds that those famous sailors of the Phaeacians had inhabited Corcyra before them. This belief did in fact encourage them to give particular attention to their navy, which was by no means an inconsiderable one. They had, at the outbreak of war, a fleet of 120 triremes. Section 26. All this caused ill feeling, and so the Corinthians were glad enough to send to Epidamnus the help required. They advertised for volunteers to settle there, and sent out a force consisting of Ambracioites, Leucadians, and their own citizens. This force marched by land into Apollonia, a Corinthian colony, avoiding the sea route out of fear that they might be intercepted by the Corcyrians. When the Corcyrians discovered that the settlers and the troops had arrived at Epidamnus and that the colony had been handed over to Corinth, they reacted violently. As soon as the news arrived, they put to sea with 25 ships, which were soon followed by another fleet. Sailing up to Epidamnus, the Corcyrians demanded in the most threatening and abusive language first that the Epidamnians should reinstate the exiled party. For these exiles in the meantime had come to Corcyra, and had appealed to the claims that their family connections, pointing out the tombs of their ancestors there, and begged for help in being brought back. Secondly, they demanded that the Epidamnians should send away the troops and settlers that had come from Corinth. The Epidamnians rejected both demands, and the Corcyrians began operations against them with a fleet of 40 ships. They had with them the exiles whom they had promised to restore to power, and also the Illyrian army. Taking up their positions in front of the city, they proclaimed an offer of immunity to all, whether citizens or not, who would abandon the city, and those who failed to take advantage of the opportunity would be treated as enemies. Then, since there was no response to this offer, they began to besiege the city of Epidamnus, which stands on an isthmus. Section 27. Messengers soon arrived at Corinth with the news that Epidamnus was being besieged, and the Corinthians began to equip a relief force. At the same time, they advertised for new volunteers to form a new colony at Epidamnus. Those who went out there were to have absolutely equal rights to their mother city, and those who were not prepared to sail at once, but still wanted to have a share in the colony, could buy this share, together with the right of remaining behind, by putting down a sum of 50 Corinthian drachmae. There was a wide response to this offer, both from people who wanted to sail at once and from people who paid the deposit. Various cities were asked to help with ships to escort the convoy in case the Corcyraeans attempted to intercept it. Megara provided 8 ships, Pale, the Cephalian city, provided 4, 5 ships came from Epidamnus, 1 from Hermione, 2 from Troesis, 10 from Leucas, and 8 from Ambrokia. The Thebans and Phliasians were asked to provide money. The Elians were asked for money and also for hulls. The Corinthians themselves equipped a fleet of 30 ships and 3,000 hoplites. When the Corcyraeans heard of these preparations, they sent an embassy to Corinth, accompanied by some envoys from Sparta and Sicyon to support them. There they demanded that Corinth should withdraw her troops and colonists from Epidamnus, since Epidamnus was no concern of hers. They were prepared, however, if Corinth wished to put forth a counterclaim, to accept arbitration. Cities in the Peloponnese should be chosen by mutual agreement to act as arbitrators, and the colony should go to whichever side the arbitrators awarded it. Alternatively, they proposed referring the matter to the oracle at Delphi. They urged Corinth not to start a war, saying that if she did, they themselves, through no fault of their own, would be forced in sheer self-defense to make friends elsewhere, and in quarters where they had no wish to make friends. The Corinthian reply to this was that if Corcyra withdrew the fleet and the foreign army from Epidamnus, then discussion might be profitable, but it was quite absurd to talk of arbitration while the city was still being besieged. The Corcyraeans countered by saying that if the Corinthians also withdrew their forces from Epidamnus, they would do as was suggested, or they were prepared to let both sides stay in their present positions and to arrange an armistice to remain in operation until the result of arbitration was declared. Section 29. None of these proposals was acceptable to the Corinthians. By this time their ships were manned and their allies were ready. They sent in front of them a herald to declare war, and then set sail with a force of 75 ships and 2,000 hoplites to fight against the Corcyraeans at Epidamnus. The fleet was under the command of Aristeus, the son of Pilicus, Callicrates, the son of Callias, and Timanor, the son of Timanthes. The land forces were commanded by Archetimus, the son of Eurytimus, and Isarchidas, the son of Isarchus. They sailed on as far as Actium, in Anactoria, at the mouth of the Ambracian Gulf, where the temple of Apollo still stands. Here they were met by a herald from the Corcyraeans, who had sailed out in a light boat with instructions to urge them not to attack. At the same time, the Corcyraeans were manning their ships. They had fitted new crossbeams to the old vessels to make them seaworthy, and had seen to it that the rest of the fleet was ready for action. By the time their herald had returned and reported that this offer of peace had been rejected, the ships, 80 of them in all, were manned. 40 were still engaged in the siege of Epidamnus. They then put out to sea against the enemy formed line and went into action. The result of the engagement was a decisive victory for the Corcyraeans, who destroyed 15 Corinthian ships. It happened that on the very same day the besiegers of Epidamnus had forced the city to surrender, the terms being that all foreign troops and settlers in the garrison should be sold as slaves, and that Corinthian citizens should be held as prisoners pending a further decision. Section 30. After the battle, the Corcyraeans put up a trophy on Leukimme, a headland of Corcyra. They then put all their prisoners to death, with the exceptions of the Corinthians, whom they still kept in custody. The Corinthians and their allies went back home after their defeat in the sea battle, and now Corcyra had complete control of the seas in her own area. A Corcyraean fleet descended on Leucas, a colony of Corinth, and laid its territory waste. They also burnt Kyllene, the Elian port, because the Elians had provided Corinth with ships and money. So for most of the time after the battle, the Corcyraeans kept control of the sea and sent fleets to attack the allies of Corinth. Finally, however, at the beginning of the following summer, Corinth, seeing the difficulties in which her allies were placed, sent out a fleet and an army. This force, in order to protect Leucas and the other friendly cities, held and fortified positions at Actium and round Chimerium in Thesprotis. The Corcyraeans, also with naval and land forces, took up positions opposite to them. Here they stayed for the rest of the summer, neither side making any move, and it was not until the beginning of winter that they both retired to their home bases.